The Rio Grande Valley, a swath of Texas where the river carves its way towards the Gulf, has become a focal point. This region, with its rugged beauty and strategic location, has long been a crossroads of cultures and histories. It's a bottleneck of migration, a place where desperation meets the unyielding machinery of U.S. border enforcement. Here, the hopes and dreams of many collide with the stark realities of immigration policies. And now, it's the stage for a new act in a long-running drama, the deployment of thousands more U.S. troops. This move is seen by some as a necessary measure to maintain order, while others view it as an escalation of tensions. This isn't the first time the military has been called upon to bolster the border, but the scale of this deployment, coupled with the increasingly heated rhetoric surrounding immigration, has many Americans deeply concerned. The debate over border security has never been more polarized. The images are stark: soldiers in camouflage, faces grim under the scorching Texas sun, stringing barbed wire and erecting barriers. These scenes evoke a sense of urgency and tension, highlighting the gravity of the situation. It feels like a war zone, but the enemy isn't a foreign army. It's the steady flow of men, women, and children seeking asylum, a better life, a chance to escape the poverty and violence that plague their home countries. These individuals are driven by hope and desperation. This deployment is about sending a message, but the message is a muddled one, caught between compassion and deterrence, between humanitarian aid and the hard realities of geopolitics. The duality of the situation is evident in every interaction. The deployment comes on the heels of President Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the border. This announcement has intensified the already heated debate over immigration. This declaration, met with fierce opposition from Democrats and skepticism from some legal experts, allows the administration to bypass Congress and allocate funds for a border wall, a cornerstone of Trump's presidential campaign. The legal and political ramifications are profound, but the wall, even if completed, is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The complexities of migration cannot be solved by physical barriers alone. The forces driving migration are complex gang violence in Central America, economic instability, climate change, and the enduring hope of a better life in the United States. Addressing these root causes requires a multifaceted approach and international cooperation. The border wall has become a potent symbol in the American political landscape, representing much more than just a physical barrier. For President Trump and his supporters, it represents a concrete solution to a complex problem, a tangible effort to address issues they feel have been neglected for too long. It stands as a physical manifestation of his America First agenda, a cornerstone of his campaign promises. It's a promise made, a promise they believe must be kept, regardless of the cost, both financially and socially. The wall, they argue, is necessary to stem the flow of illegal immigration, drugs, and crime into the United States, a critical measure for national security. It's about regaining control of the border, about asserting American sovereignty and protecting the homeland. Opponents of the wall view it as a costly and ineffective boondoggle, a project that diverts funds from more effective solutions. They see it as a monument to xenophobia and fear-mongering, a symbol of division rather than unity. They argue that it won't stop the flow of drugs or people, as most illegal activities occur at legal ports of entry. They believe it will only serve to further militarize the border and harm the fragile ecosystem of the region, causing more harm than good. They point to the fact that most drugs entering the U.S. come through legal ports of entry, not across the vast stretches of land where the wall is being built. Critics argue that the money being poured into the wall could be better spent on addressing the root causes of migration: poverty, violence, and lack of opportunity in Central America. They believe that investing in these areas would reduce the need for people to flee their homes in the first place. The debate over the wall is not just about bricks and mortar. It's about the very soul of America. It's about who we are as a nation and who we aspire to be in the future. It's about our values, our identity, and our commitment to the principles that define us, and who we want to be as a society. Do we want to be a country that welcomes those fleeing persecution and seeking a better life, offering them a chance at the American dream? Or do we want to be a country that walls itself off from the world, that turns its back on those in need? The answer to that question is still being written, as the nation grapples with its identity and future. The deployment of thousands of troops to the border suggests that the Trump administration is determined to take a hard line, even if it means further dividing the nation and deepening the rift between opposing viewpoints. The wall remains a contentious issue, emblematic of the broader struggle over the direction of the country. The sight of soldiers patrolling the border evokes strong emotions, conjuring images of war and conflict. It's a powerful visual that can stir a range of feelings, from fear to reassurance, depending on one's perspective. But it's crucial to understand the limitations of their role. These soldiers are not here to engage in combat or enforce laws directly. The military, in this instance, is not authorized to enforce immigration law. They are bound by strict rules of engagement that prevent them from direct involvement in law enforcement activities. They are there in a support capacity, assisting Customs and Border Patrol with logistical tasks, surveillance, and infrastructure projects. Their presence is meant to bolster the efforts of CBP, not replace them. They're building fences, operating surveillance equipment, and providing transportation, freeing up CBP agents to focus on apprehending migrants. This division of labor is designed to maximize efficiency and effectiveness. The military presence, however, is undeniable, and its impact extends far beyond the practical tasks being performed. It creates a palpable sense of security and order, but also tension. The sight of soldiers in camouflage, even if unarmed, sends a message of deterrence, a reminder of the might of the U.S. government. This visual cue is powerful and intentional. This message is not lost on the migrants, many of whom are already terrified, having journeyed thousands of miles, often on foot, to reach the border. The sight of military personnel can be both intimidating and disheartening. For them, the presence of the military only adds to the sense of fear and uncertainty. It complicates an already arduous journey, adding another layer of psychological stress. It's a delicate balancing act, providing support for CBP without creating the perception of a militarized border. The goal is to enhance security without escalating tensions unnecessarily. The Pentagon has been careful to emphasize the non-law enforcement nature of the mission, but the optics are difficult to ignore. The presence of military uniforms alone can change the atmosphere. The presence of the military, even in a support role, raises concerns about the militarization of the border and the potential for mission creep. These are valid concerns that need to be addressed transparently. How long will these troops remain deployed? The duration of their stay is uncertain and depends on evolving circumstances at the border. What happens if the situation at the border escalates? The potential for conflict or increased tension is always present. These are questions that the Pentagon and the Trump administration will have to grapple with as the deployment continues. The answers will shape the future of border security and military involvement. The deployment of troops to the border raises important legal questions, particularly regarding the Posse Comitatus Act. Passed in 1878, this law prohibits the use of the U.S. military for domestic law enforcement purposes, except in specific circumstances authorized by Congress. This means that soldiers cannot arrest or detain migrants, nor can they conduct searches and seizures without probable cause. Their role is strictly limited to supporting civilian law enforcement agencies like CBP. The Posse Comitatus Act is a cornerstone of American democracy, ensuring the separation of military power from civilian authority. It reflects a deep-seated distrust of using the military for domestic policing, a fear rooted in our colonial past and reinforced by the experiences of other nations where the military plays a more active role in civilian life. The Trump administration has insisted that the deployment fully complies with the Posse Comitatus Act, arguing that the military's role is strictly limited to support functions. However, critics argue that the deployment pushes the boundaries of the law, blurring the lines between military and civilian authority. They worry that this deployment could set a dangerous precedent, normalizing the use of the military for domestic law enforcement purposes.
The deployment of thousands of troops to the border has sparked intense debate within the Pentagon itself. There's a real concern among some officials that this is a slippery slope. They worry that this deployment, while technically legal, could erode the Posse Comitatus Act and lead to a more permanent military presence on the border. Bertrand, who has been closely covering the Pentagon's response to the border crisis, says that many officials are uncomfortable with the deployment, but feel pressured to carry out the orders of the commander-in-chief. They see this as a political issue, not a military one. They're worried about being dragged into a domestic political fight, and they're concerned about the long-term implications for the military. The Pentagon, Bertrand says, is walking a tightrope, trying to balance its obligation to carry out the orders of the president with its responsibility to uphold the law and protect the integrity of the military. It's a difficult position to be in, and it's one that is likely to become even more challenging as the situation at the border continues to unfold.
While thousands of National Guard troops have been deployed to the border for months, the recent surge includes over 2,200 active duty forces. This shift from a primarily National Guard presence to a more active duty role signals a potential escalation in the administration's approach. Active duty troops are generally considered to be more prepared for deployment and engagement, raising concerns about the potential for a more forceful response to the migrant caravans. The Pentagon insists that these troops will be used solely for support functions, such as logistics, surveillance, and engineering. They argue that the active duty forces are necessary to provide the necessary expertise and manpower to effectively support CBP. However, critics point to the inherent risks of having a large military presence in a volatile situation. The potential for miscalculation, accidents, or escalation is always present, particularly when dealing with desperate people fleeing difficult circumstances. The deployment of active duty troops, even in a support role, raises the stakes and increases the possibility of unintended consequences.